Without question, the season that has gotten the most changes over any type of PTR cycle. Season 2, huge changes coming. Before we start, what is this picture? Does this not look like Undercity or Brill or something like that? I have no idea, but it's a big picture of an explosive. And if you haven't seen the title of it, it's because they removed explosive. So let's talk a little bit about this. Right out of the gate, it says our changes this week aim to further lessen the impact of affixes on Mythic Plus Dungeon gameplay and to match our more challenging affixes to later keystone levels as players progress through the system. And to me, I don't believe that that is what they're doing here. So I'm a little confused on that statement. And I definitely am a little confused about why they would want to lessen the impact of affixes on Mythic Plus Dungeons and then nerf them in the way they did. And we'll talk about that when we get there. Okay. We have been evaluating our fixed tiers, and while we feel the change to bring affixes online at 7 to 14 is healthy, so if you haven't seen, there's tons of changes already. No seasonal affixes are going to come out at 7 and 14 instead of 3 and 7. Tons like new affixes, removing old affixes, now explosives on the list as well. Anyway, we want to ensure that the right level of challenge is coming online at 7 and 14. With that said, we feel our current 7 affixes have a larger impact on the moment-to-moment gameplay for groups, and I've decided to switch the levels that our keystone affixes come online. So that, yeah, so this was the bucket or whatever you want to call it. I guess the numbers are what's confusing me. But anyway, yeah, this was what used to be the, uh, I don't even know. But so they're 14 now. Okay, so this is like the hierarchy will have these, but realistically, this doesn't matter. Like, unless you're like super not into progressing at all, you're going to be doing about 14 and you're not going to care which affix came online first. It just doesn't matter. But this doesn't seem like the harder segment of affixes now anymore. And we'll talk about why in a second. But anyway, yes, they did remove explosive and just replaced it with volcanic. So keep an eye on that list of 5 affixes. We're coming back to that. Okay. Let's talk about the nerfs that they did as well. In addition to the changes below or above, we've been reviewing our impact of our fixes and made tuning adjustments with the goal of lessening their overall impact on dungeon gameplay. So explosive is just straight out given up on, and they had made a bunch of changes to it. If you haven't been watching the videos on this topic, they had made a bunch of changes to it to the point where I was like, they're going to solve this problem. I think this is a really good idea. They're trying to remove this weird like social thing where people are just like boycotting handling it. They're just like, well, it's the healer's problem, not mine. But I've literally seen like many groups fail to kill explosives and us wipe to that. So what else can we say about DPS mentality and keys anymore? But yeah, they pretty much got the affix removed. That mentality was not going to go away. People are, very coveting their own ability to DPS, and they're unwilling to do anything that, would even remotely hinder that at times. So they pretty much had to give up, which is sad to me. Explosive is definitely one of my favorite affixes ever. Probably is my favorite affix ever. I like the current iteration where you just kind of switch to it, kill it, and move back. It's fun. I enjoy it as a tank. It's fun to switch targets a lot and be active, like targeting things. So what they had tried to do was they try to make big changes to it, where it was going to be like much harder to kill, so everybody would have to switch to it. And then if you failed to kill it, there was going to be punishment. But honestly, it was just getting too hard. Like it was getting to the point where it was going to be way, way, way more difficult than the other affixes. And so then instead of doing that, they remove it and add the easiest affix ever, volcanic. And I think this is a huge, huge, huge mistake, and we're gonna really notice it this season. So let's come back to that, I guess. Actually, I mean, I just don't know. Like, yeah, let's come back to that. So, incorporeal and corporeal beings now fade away when combat with them has ended, and I love this idea. Why didn't you just do this with explosive? I like, you know what I mean? This was obvious to me the whole time. Make it tied to the mobs, and even you don't even have to make them fade away. Just make them not explode if the mobs that spawn them are dead. That was always something that was in them. Like it seemed obvious to me. And another one, afflicted souls no longer scale past 20. So these two affixes got some small changes, but they're pretty. I think these are fair and the right nerf to these affixes. I don't. So what do you guys think about the health no longer scaling past 20? This is something that's kind of gone back and forth on affixes. Faxi brought it up, like imagine if that the prideful mob that spawned didn't have its health scaling past 20, how differently the affix would have been received and handled. Because people were just straight up skipping it because it had so much health you couldn't kill it. And that's like, to me, again, the good solution. I mean, this is a stable solution. this is way better than doing what they do in this next segment of affixes. And these affixes are still really difficult. They also nerfed the hell out of Entangling. It's down to a 30% slow. It's going to get to the point where it's like, well, what is it even? Why do I even need to move out of it? But I guarantee people are going to die as affix. This affix, when it first comes, the first week you see it, it's going to just cause chaos in keys. People are going to be overreacting to it and trying to snap clear it and run into other mechanics, or they're just going to stand in it and not move properly and then be surprised. Yeah, it's going to be a bad affix. It's probably going to be the worst affix for pugging, and the one that individuals have to be ready for the most, because any type of boss mechanic is just going to immediately compromise your ability to do both. And people have been bringing up the idea of entangling and spiteful together, things like that. Anytime we have to move your character, of course, volcanic, that's on the same list here, so you won't have any type of interaction with that as well. But yeah, I don't know. They also added a visual for it, so we can take a look at that real quick. This is actually a pretty big deal. Big visual on it now, and it was really hard to see before. But yeah, you just move out of that if you can't really. If you're looking for something to compare it to, it's like the slow from the corruption from season 4 Dragonflight. So if you don't need to, if you don't feel like you need to move out of it, then just don't. Is basically the end of the day. It doesn't seem to do anything other than slow you. And so you're fighting trash. There's no reason to move out. Then don't. You know what I mean? It's really that straightforward, it seems. But then, so these are from what I could tell, these are supposed to be the harder affixes coming up here. And I guess I don't know if I'm misunderstanding with this, but this is not the way you make these the harder affixes. These are way, way, way harder. If you haven't seen Afflicted, it's crazy, dude. It's spawning like 30 mobs if you pull really big. Same thing with Incorporeal. Like, this is wild, dude. It's either still overtuned. I don't really know what's going on. Something is not balanced, okay? And that's what I was talking about with volcanic. Like, when you see these new 3 affixes compared to volcanic, it's like, what? The funny thing about volcanic, though, is that the only time I've ever found it difficult was in Underrot, and that is actually coming back this season. Last boss in Underrot. I wouldn't be surprised if people, complained about it like they did with Quaking on some of the bosses, and they got it changed. But it is funny because that's the only boss that's ever been even remotely difficult with volcanic, because those orbs on that last boss of Underrot, they just spawn tons and tons of volcanoes. But anyway, yeah, so we have the new level 14 affixes. Spiteful has had its melee damage reduced by 10%, which on its own I don't really, that number doesn't seem relevant much. But then you see they also made it so their health and damage no longer scale after level 20. And so again, the same thing like we saw with Afflicted. Should they do this more? You guys leave your comments. But in reality, it just, to me, it's like, level 20 is just too low for this. I think that's really the way I look at it. Like, it is just too low, because 20 is where the gear curve stops now, right? It's a logical place for it to stop, but like, people go way above the level 20 thing. And now that they're nerfing the affixes, you're definitely going to see season 2 definitely going to be 30s. So that's a big drop. And again, it's like, are you sure the other affixes are balanced if that's the case? Because you don't have to kill them, first of all. Like, they die on their own, and I don't know if nerfing their overall health makes them die faster. I don't think it does. But it's just kind of a strange, it just seems imbalanced, or maybe I don't know. But anyway, raging and bolstering, these are the crazy ones. Raging now grants creatures immunity to crowd control effect for 20 seconds upon reaching 30% health, instead of what it used to do, which was 50% increased damage until a mob was defeated. And from what I've been told, you can still purge it, okay? So yes, no longer going to require like druids, hunters like crazy on those weeks, which did create some imbalance. I always didn't mind that, though, because it encouraged, certain comps, and it helped the meta stay a little bit different week to week. But there was another big change, or like concern. People initially found that it was immune to interrupts as well. It says interrupts and crowd control. But then this quickly got changed, so it's only crowd control effects. And I don't know if that was ever supposed to be the case, because the post literally doesn't say interrupt, it just says crowd control. So it makes me think maybe they were testing it with interrupts as well. But it doesn't matter. It lasts for 20 seconds. I mean, I don't. This is like so easy now. This is like the easiest affix in the game now. What do you need to what do you need to crowd control enemies? Like I don't even that's all they do. That's all it does. It does nothing else. What does this even matter? This is like a weaker inspiring. You remember inspiring? This is like the worst version of inspiring. I don't understand what the point of this is. Especially if you can still interrupt the mobs. I mean, I guess you can't grip them or stun them or something anymore. I mean, this has now gone to from one of the hard, like fortified raging and fortified bolstering were so difficult to tank. They don't do anything now. It's so freaking easy now. It's actually insane how much easier this is going to be now. Those 2 weeks, and then bolstering. If you haven't seen it already, bolstering no longer increases the health of affected creatures. It still increases the damage, but the reality is that you ever pull so many mobs. Like the health is why it's difficult, right? Because then the mob lives so long that you now have to have a different contingency to kill it and survive it as a tank. But if it's only damage, it's like, okay, so now that's just a weaker raging, right? So you basically nerfed raging out of difficulty range, and you put bolstering into the same kind of bucket that raging used to fill, but you just can't actually get away from it. Like it's not something that you could purge anymore. So they just nerfed these two affixes into the ground, and then Sanguine Ichor Puddles now only lasts for 12 seconds. This again almost doesn't matter. There's some moments though in like Knockwood and some other dungeons in Dragonflight where it was really difficult to get the mobs out of the puddles. So yeah, that's a huge nerf in that case. But 90% of the time, even 12 seconds of healing is far, far, far too much. So that was kind of just a bad, like a weak nerf. I really think the way they should nerf Sanguine is they should make the healing ramp up over time. The first 3-4 seconds, it shouldn't punish you as bad as it does. But then if it's in there for 5+ seconds, then yeah, at that point you've done, you've failed the affix one way or the other. So, but anyway, yeah, these are massive, massive nerfs to these affixes. So now we have Spiteful, which has always been easy and could be dangerous with Entangling, but otherwise I don't see, especially from the tank roll, obviously, there's nothing there. Raging has been nerfed into oblivion. Like that is no longer an affix in my eyes. It does nothing now. Maybe I'll be wrong. I hope I will be. Bursting has never been hard, especially as Death Knight. You can just AMS it. Bolstering is way, way, way easier now. It's really just, yeah, again, you won't even care that the mobs bolster. And Sanguine has always been a little bit of an annoyance, but really, it's pretty easy, honestly. Like there's some affixes that there's some packs with some of these affixes that are really dangerous, but for most of them you just don't really have to worry about it. So yeah, certainly the removal of the seasonal affix made me think it was going to be a harder season. And whatever they're doing with some of the tuning here, like Incorporeal and Afflicted, still seem way, way harder than any other affix in the game right now, especially comparing them to Volcanic. But from what I could tell, this is going to be the easiest season just numerically. We'll see how the dungeons play out because it does sound like some of the dungeons are really hard. But I haven't been on there. There's some other things that I did notice. I don't understand what's going on here, but I think this is kind of just a failure of Wowhead to probably make this post. Not like anybody cares about this at this point, but basically, if you go on the PTR, there's the place that you buy the keystones, and instead of a explosive there, it's shielding. They changed the name of the affix, and so just like with the raging thing, where it was originally interrupts, and then they hotfixed it within seconds of it being testable. I think this was probably the same thing. At some point, there was like a build that we never saw that had shielding as a testable thing, and they're just like, yeah, this isn't gonna work. And so somebody brought up like, is explosive still going to actually explode, or is it literally just going to shield the mobs? I would somebody go on the PTR and test this. Put this on a keystone and tell me, did it have a different visual? Was it the exact same as it was? Did it have a different like icon in the dungeon thing? You guys tell me. I don't know anything about it. I don't have time to go on there really, but it's interesting. I will tell you that these changes do sound like they're going to really make dungeons a lot easier, and on top of no seasonal affix. Some people do believe that the seasonal affix, this expansion made dungeons harder, and I think for pugging, you would not necessarily be wrong. So let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Is this going to make them much, much easier? Do you think this is the right direction? And especially, I'd love to hear your thoughts on should they continue to make affixes not scale past 20? Do you think that's the right number? How are you feeling about all this?